City's COVID cases ease slightly, but health officials call for caution. Public hospitals start reducing services to focus resources. Beijing issues warning to the U.S. over warships in Taiwan Straits. Hello and welcome to TVB News. Hong Kong reported about 8,500 new COVID-19 infections today after the city's daily COVID tally topped 9,000 yesterday. However, the Department of Health warned that the figure of a single day does not reflect the actual trend. Caleb Leung has details.
Among the 8,488 new COVID-19 infections reported today, 8,252 were locally transmitted cases. During today's press conference held by the Department of Health and the Hospital Authority, health officials were asked what today's figure signifies.
I think the number one day, a bit lower number today, may not reflect the actual trend because we do have day-to-day variation in number in the past. And I understand that the government will closely monitor the situation and, if necessary, may have other measures.
The government announced it will go back to the old practice of only conducting random nucleic acid tests on those who declare a positive result after taking a rapid antigen test.
For the spot check of the rapid antigen test, one explanation why we do that is because of the low false negative rate so far we have tested. And the second, of course, is because of the rapid increase in number of the tests we have to do. So we have to be more efficient in the use of our laboratory testings.
9 more residential care homes reported new infections. Some 110 schools reported 206 new COVID cases, with 7 schools suspending designated classes. Meanwhile, the condition of a 17-month-old infected baby who was earlier admitted to Princess Margaret Hospital is now critical.
It's possible that he could choke or he might not breathe so well. And so doctors wanted to protect him and intubated him so he could be put on a ventilator.
The hospital authorities said infected children will be admitted to adult wards when pediatric wards are full. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Government pandemic advisor Professor Lau Yulong said there is a chance that Hong Kong's daily COVID tally could reach 14,000 to 20,000. Lau said he made the estimation based on the experience of Singapore. Meanwhile, as school is about to start on September 1st, Lau said the government should increase incentives for children to get vaccinated. Such incentives could include allowing students to go outdoors to exercise if at least 90% of students of a school have taken 3 jabs. Lau added he believes that face-to-face classes in schools should not be suspended. Starting today, the hospital authority will suspend or reduce clinic sessions of some of its general outpatient clinics. The purpose is to adjust its service in order to focus resources on anti-epidemic work. Caleb Leung has details.
The Central District Health Center General Outpatient Clinic is one of the clinics that will temporarily suspend service. A notice was posted on the front door to remind patients to go to other clinics for follow-up consultation. Aside from this facility, clinics in Stanley and Ta Kwu Ling are also closed. Chronic patients with follow-up appointments at these clinics are advised to refill their drugs at their corresponding medication refill clinics on their appointment day. For example, patients of Lee Kin Memorial Dispensary at Kowloon City are transferred to Central Kowloon Health Center. The 2 facilities are around 2 kilometers apart. This man said it is odd for the hospital authority to make such arrangements, as these clinics remain open during the pandemic before, and the situation is not too serious now. This woman said she is not affected as she lives nearer to the newly assigned clinic. Some clinics are also adjusting operating hours. The 4 clinics at Shao Kei Wan, Aberdeen, Cheung Kwan No and Tai Po will be closed on Sundays and public holidays. The one in Madam Yong Fong Shi Health Center in Yuen Long will suspend service on Saturdays. 5 clinics are suspending evening service. The hospital authority warned if the epidemic situation continues to deteriorate, it may need to further reduce services so as to mobilize more beds and manpower. KW Leung, TVB News.
Secretary for Development Bernadette Lin says she is confident the plan to build public housing on Fanling Golf Course will get the go-ahead. That's despite a lack of consensus over its development. Under the proposal, the government plans to recall a targeted 32-hectare parcel of land on the golf course. Some 9 hectares will be devoted to building public housing. But after more than 20 hours of discussions, the proposal remains in limbo. This as the Environmental Protection Department's Advisory Council still couldn't decide on whether to greenlight the golf course's environmental impact assessment report. Secretary for Development Bernadette Lin says the government is confident about the plan securing final approval. This as the 12,000 public housing units on the Fanling site are considered key to housing supply over the next 10 years. A day after 2 U.S. Navy warships sailed through the Taiwan Strait, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Beijing said the U.S. should not be a troublemaker for peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. The U.S. Navy confirmed that cruisers Chancellorsville and Antietam were carrying out operations on Sunday, the first since a visit to Taiwan by U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi enraged Beijing. The operations were closely monitored by China's military. Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian urged the U.S. to earnestly abide by the One China principle and the 3 Sino-U.S. joint communiques. Cambodian police have rescued multiple Chinese and Thai nationals for alleged unlawful imprisonment. Cambodian authorities launched the rescue operation at the request of the Thai embassy in the country. 19 Thai nationals were found in a company under suspected forced labor in the downtown area of southwestern Cambodia. 15 of them have previous convictions of fraud in Thailand. On the same day, in a gambling den in Odar Myan Che province, which borders Thailand, Cambodian police also rescued 4 Chinese nationals. Meanwhile, 3 Taiwanese killed in a shooting in Phnom Penh on Sunday were found to have had previous fraud convictions and were involved in triad activity. Nearly a quarter of British adults plan not to turn on the heating this winter, a new poll has found. With skyrocketing energy bills adding to the already high cost of living, UK unions are considering stepping up industrial action. Tracy Furness reports.
The United Kingdom has seen waves of strikes this summer by the public transport system and garbage truck drivers, amongst others. But things may get worse as some unions are expected to table motions ahead of the Trade Union Congress next month that will allow them to coordinate strikes to ensure the greatest impact on services. And this is why.
My pay has only gone up £5 in 16 years. So imagine that, how much has my rent gone up, my food, my cost of living in general.
Anything above inflation. That's what we want. We want to afford living.
The Trade Union Congress said that the Trade Union Centre would offer support.
We want it to be as short and as effective as it can be. In order for it not to be prolonged, then you want to maximise its effectiveness. If that means unions working together, then we would absolutely support and encourage unions to do that.
Britain's inflation last week stood at 10%. Those economic challenges facing the population have only been increased due to soaring energy costs. Residents in Britain have seen an 80% increase in annual energy bills in October. Out of 2,000 British adults surveyed by a market research firm, 23% said they would do without heat in the winter months. And 27% of parents with children under 18 said they would leave the radiators cold. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Coming up after the break, former top banker and educator Vincent Cheng passes away. United Nations experts allowed to examine Russian-controlled nuclear plant in Ukraine. NASA's latest moon mission is expected to launch soon. Welcome back to TVB News. Renowned banker Vincent Cheng has died at the age of 74. Known as the first Chinese taipan of HSBC, Cheng made impressive contributions to the city's public policy as a lawmaker and member of the Executive Council. Chief Executive John Lee expressed condolences over Cheng's passing, describing him as an esteemed banker of Hong Kong. Jackie Lin looks back at his life.
Coming from a humble neighborhood in Sham Shui Po, Vincent Cheng Hoi Chun was brought up by his fruit hawker parents and had his fair share of adversity before becoming a renowned homegrown banker.
Other than economics and finances, I feel very strongly about rehabilitation because I happen to be a physically handicapped myself.
Having contracted polio at the age of 6, Cheng had to use a crutch to get around. After studying in Technical Secretary School, Cheng studied economics at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. At the time, he was an active participant in social movements and served as vice president at the University Student Union. His first job, a social worker at the Hong Kong Society for the Blind. After completing his master's degree in New Zealand, he joined HSBC in 1978 while taking up various posts in public office. They include as a comment to the government's Central Policy Unit. In 1991, Cheng was appointed a lawmaker. He also served as an Executive Council member.
I personally think that inflation is tapering off, and we'll see how things go from here.
Cheng met with former Chinese President Jiang Zemin before the handover.
Mr. Cheng continued to stress on market reform. If China continues its market reform, then its economic system will be more compatible with that of Hong Kong. And any economic friction that we may have had now may be easier.
In 2005, Cheng made history as the first Chinese chairman of HSBC's Asia-Pacific arm. Over the years, Cheng served as a non-executive director or council members at multiple companies and institutions, including the MTR Corporation. He was also the council chairman of his alma mater, Chinese University, from 2009 to 2015. On Sunday, Vincent Cheng, who had been suffering from cancer for years, died at the Hong Kong Sanatorium and Hospital at the age of 74. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
The United Nations nuclear watchdog said today it would inspect the Russian-controlled Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine this week. The announcement via Twitter comes after months of talks in which the International Atomic Energy Agency sought access to the facility. Ukrainian staff are still operating the plant under the orders of Russian forces, a situation that the IAEA has said threatens the safety of Europe's largest nuclear plant. The mission led by IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi will assess any damage from recent shelling near the plant, which Russia and Ukraine have blamed on each other. We must protect the safety and security of Ukraine's and Europe's biggest nuclear facility, Grossi said in the tweet. The United Nations wants the area to be removed of military equipment and personnel. The suffering continues in Pakistan with millions of people affected by heavy flooding caused by monsoon rains. The Pakistan military is at full stretch in rescue and relief for thousands whose homes have been destroyed, with a death toll at more than 1,000. Nazvi Karim reports.
This is a satellite image of homes and fields in a village along Pakistan's Indus River before the flooding. This is the same village after the banks of the river burst and completely swamped the area. It's the same story in other parts of the country as devastating monsoon rains batter vast areas of Pakistan from the northeast to the south. This boy is one of the fortunate ones, plucked to safety by an army helicopter hovering just feet above raging floodwaters in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. Some 75 others were rescued from the rooftops of their houses in Sindh province. Officials say more than 1,000 people have died so far in some of the worst flooding in Pakistan's history, with more than 30 million people affected since mid-June.
They're absolutely devastating. I haven't seen any destruction or devastation of this scale. I find it very difficult to put into words the phraseologies that we're used to, whether it's monsoon rains or flooding, doesn't quite seem to encapsulate the ongoing devastation and disaster that we're still witnessing.
Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif on Sunday announced a $45 million relief fund for the flood-hit Balochistan province in the south. Flash flooding washed away villages and crops as soldiers and rescue workers evacuated stranded residents to the safety of relief camps and provided food to thousands of displaced Pakistanis. With meteorologists expecting worse flooding to come, Pakistan's military chief, General Qamar Javed Bajwa, appealed to the international community for support. I appeal to my Pakistani benefactors, he said. Come forward and help your brothers who are having a very difficult time. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
Pope Francis Sunday prayed for the victims of devastating floods in Pakistan, which have killed over 1,000 people since mid-June. Speaking during a pilgrimage to the Italian town of L'Aquila, the site of a deadly earthquake in 2009, the pontiff said he wanted to show solidarity. Francis also exhorted the faithful to pray for the people of Ukraine and to bring peace to the rest of the world. The earthquake in L'Aquila killed 305 people, and much of the town is still being rebuilt. The visit by Francis was part of a late summer tradition begun by Pope Celestine V 728 years ago to encourage the faithful to seek forgiveness for sins. A 6.4 magnitude earthquake struck off the coast of Indonesia's Sumatra Island, the third tremor to hit the area since early today, the country's geophysics agency said. Residents of the city of Padang and a village on Siberut Island in West Sumatra raced out of a hospital and other buildings when they felt the tremor. At a public hospital in Padang, staff, patients, and families were evacuated outside and onto the rooftop as the quake struck. The disaster agency urged the public not to panic and warned of the potential for aftershocks. Padang was struck by a 7.6 magnitude earthquake in 2009 that killed more than 1,100 people. And in possibly less than an hour's time, NASA's Artemis moon rocket is scheduled to take off on a test flight to put a crew capsule into lunar orbit for the first time in 50 years. This report from NBC.
Tonight, the threat of violent morning thunderstorms is hanging over NASA's plans to launch Artemis early Monday, after a series of lightning strikes hit lightning towers near the launch pad 5 times on Saturday. NASA says none of them caused any damage to the rocket, named after the twin sister of the Greek god Apollo. But Artemis is even more powerful than the Saturn V rockets that carried Apollo astronauts to the moon, lifting the Orion crew capsule to a 42-day uncrewed orbit around the moon.
This mission goes with a lot of hopes and dreams of a lot of people, and we now are the Artemis generation.
If all goes as planned, astronauts could be on board in 2024, then a moon landing in 2025 or later. Just like Apollo, the astronauts on Orion will lift off on their backs, but there's 30% more room inside Orion than Apollo, which means there's room for 4 astronauts instead of 3. Now, right over there is a retractable rowing machine for exercise, and right there is a commode. Orion will eventually dock with a new space station called Gateway, orbiting the moon.
It's going to let us fly crews from Earth to Gateway. From there, they will go onto the lunar surface.
Already, the Gateway components are coming together at this facility in Houston.
Eventually, 4 or 5 of these modules will be linked together, orbiting the moon, with crew spending, on average, 30 days on station.
Those astronauts will then use a lunar lander to descend to a moon base for 6-day stays.
When astronauts come on board, their goal isn't to stay here the whole time. It's to get prepared to get in the lander and go down to the surface and spend time.
This is like base camp that's circling the moon.
Exactly. That's a good way to look at it.
Just like Apollo, Orion will return to Earth, but hotter and faster, parachuting into the Pacific Ocean.
Launch teams at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida spent a final full day of preparations ahead of the planned liftoff of NASA's rocket.
It is hard to describe how I feel about this launch. I really struggle for words because I was 4 years old when we first walked on the moon, and I remember my parents taking me and my older sister out in the backyard and pointing to the moon and saying, "We've got people there." And ever since then, I've wanted to be an astronaut.
NASA officials said that all systems appeared go for liftoff, and weather forecasts called for an 80% chance of favorable conditions at the top of the 2-hour launch window this evening. If the countdown clock is halted for any reason, NASA has set September 2nd and 5th as potential backup launch dates. Up next, Money Matters. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.